so happy to be here. I wanted to begin by saying that society, family, and friends give you a very clear message of what the ideal cancer survivor should look like, right? Am I right? Grateful, cheerful, brave, inspiring. And no doubt, along your journey so far, you have been all of those things. And there is also more to the story, more to your story and more to my story. And what if the focus on positive thinking and always looking super positive can actually be an obstacle to deeper emotional healing? And what if what you're feeling on the inside were as important as what you look like on the outside? It's my opinion as a tenured breast cancer survivor and as a psychotherapist that one of the most underaddressed side effects of going through cancer is the emotional fallout, the emotional trauma that people deal with. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own story first. So here I am in the middle of chemo at my parents' house. I got my treatment at MD Anderson in Houston. And I was diagnosed when my daughter was 2 months old. And I was 39 years old. She was my first baby. And I had done a home birth. And so I was very involved in holistic practices. I was a vegetarian for many years. I meditated every day. And yet I still got breast cancer. How surprising, right? Not. Because I know a lot of you also had very healthy lifestyles as well. And yet, here you are. So when I was diagnosed, I ended up getting my treatment in Houston because my mother lived near MD Anderson and would take care of the baby while I would go in for treatment. So this is my daughter, Alima, and she was probably about 4 months old at this point. So you didn't choose this identity, and yet here you are. And because I'm a yogi and a yoga teacher, I think people really felt like I was going to be able to breeze through treatment. That's even a phrase that somebody had said to me, Carol, you're just going to be able to breeze through treatment. And so there was a lot of expectation that as a psychotherapist, as a yoga teacher, that I was going to be super cheerful all the time and super positive. And I could often put that on, but down inside I was experiencing all different kinds of feelings. And having to come to terms with my first year with my daughter being very different from what I thought it was going to be. And also with everything being so out of my control and having to go from being a helper to somebody who was benefiting from social work services and the patient navigator and all of that. And that was a very different role for me to be in. And so I got through treatment. I did chemo, surgery, radiation, tamoxifen for 10 years. And so, of course, you can come to the end of treatment and you feel like, oh, everything's going to be great now. And I'm going to get my life back and things are going to go back on track. And everybody around you is certainly expecting that. Am I right? Let me stop and just ask a moment where people are in treatment, because I see a lot of green lanyards. So how many people have finished active treatment? Okay. How many people are in treatment right now? Okay. And how many people are more than 3 years out of treatment? Okay. All right, just to give me a good sense of it. So after I had finished treatment, and I was ready to get my life back and start working and be back at my old level of energy, what I found was that I was really just beginning to thaw out. And I find that as people approach the end of treatment, that's what begins to happen. You've been in fight or flight. You've been struggling for your life, trying to get through every single day. And then as you hit the end of treatment and there's a little bit more space there for you to notice what's happening for you, all of the feelings start to come up. And this can be a very difficult time for people, and it certainly was for me. I went through times when I felt very depressed, and then also guilty about that, because you want to be so grateful and you want to be enjoying every single moment now that you realize exactly how precious life is. And so it can feel like a real bind in that you are feeling like you want to maximize every moment, and you're also having feelings that you're struggling with. And so, because I'm a yogi and a yoga teacher and a psychotherapist, I really, over time, began to turn to helping others deal with this phase where you are at the end of treatment and wanting to get your life back and recover emotionally. And since I am a yogi, I'm going to invite everybody to just have a moment where we practice an exercise for feeling grounded. So you can participate as much or as little as you want in this, but if you feel comfortable, I would invite you to just sit up in your chair and place both feet on the floor. And you can have your hands on your legs. And if you feel comfortable, you could close your eyes or you could just look down towards the table. And so not putting any pressure on yourself, just being, just allowing yourself to arriving to this moment in space and time, noticing what it's like to be sitting here in this room today, allowing everything to be just as it is. And let's take a moment to notice the sounds from the environment. And now bring your awareness to what you are experiencing in your body. And just being the observer of that. Not judging yourself in any way. Just noticing what's happening inside of you. Now become aware of where you are in contact with the chair and feel your feet inside your shoes against the floor and just noticing those sensations without judging yourself in any way. Here you are, and just turning your attention towards your own experience. You might notice the thoughts and feelings happening inside of you. Not pushing anything away. They're all part of your human experience. And then notice how you're breathing. And begin to lengthen and deepen your breathing. With each inhale, drawing in prana, the life force energy. And with each exhale, letting go of tension. With each exhale, letting go of expectation of yourself. You're allowed to just be present. And then bring your awareness to the center of your chest and feel that area soften. Softening your attitude towards yourself. Softening your expectations of yourself. Breathing long and deep. In this moment, everything's already okay. You can just just continue to breathe long and deep during the rest of the presentation. I'm going to share about 6 principles for emotional recovery that I have discovered over my own journey through life and in the last 10 years since I finished active treatment. And principle number 1 is getting real about the impact that cancer has on your life. And I wanted to give a little example of a client that I worked with who she actually had tongue cancer and had a very difficult recovery. And in the first year after her treatment ended, she would come into my office and she would be so hard on herself about how she was trying to write a book in her field, which was gaming, computer games. And she needed to be publishing, and yet she was just devastated with a lot of fatigue and a lot of brain fog, and she had trouble still. She couldn't walk around the block. She had also been in a coma, because she had an infection. But she was so dissociated from the way that she had been impacted by the cancer that she was determined to just push herself, and she was very self-critical about not being able to accomplish goals very quickly. And so over time, I was able to help her see. But what she would always come in and say is, "I don't want to have had cancer." Like, she was not going to let it have stopped her at all. And while that can be an okay mindset, to feel mad about the cancer or to feel like you're not going to let that hold you back from important goals in your life, she was not making any space for her self-healing. She needed to get her energy back. She needed to get her mobility back. But all she could focus on was, I need to be writing. And then when she couldn't write, being really angry at herself. And so that's why I came up with this first principle, which is that you really need to allow for changes and shifts to have happened. You have been impacted, and you are different. Your life story's going to be different. That does not mean that you're not going to have moments of great joy, that you're not going to fully engage in your life again and have a wonderful social life and be able to do fun things and achieve great things. But it is important to create the time and space for your own healing as though it were as important a project as all the other projects that you're thinking about doing. And this principle, holds in AA, in all types of different healing modalities. First, you have to get honest with yourself and be real, first of all with yourself and then with others as you can, about the fact that you are impacted and that you need people to have some certain amount of understanding about what is different for you now. And when you can do that, then there's a lot of relief. You're able to get help and feel understood. So here are some different ways that people feel impacted. Emotionally, you can have your view of your safety in the world shattered. Your trust in the future can be changed. You have all kinds of big feelings. You can feel real volatile. On the flip side, you might feel numb. I don't know if anybody has experienced that. I definitely did. And I had a baby who was a year and a half who I loved so much, but there would be times when I felt like I'm not feeling anything. It's hard for me to feel. And I would worry about what's that going to mean for her if her mother is so numb. Is she going to know how much I love her? And that numb feeling is it's one of the signs of a traumatic stress response. So relationally, relationships that have been neglected may be rekindled. So you may have had people reach out to you or heal a relationship that had previously where you'd been estranged. That had been the case with me, with my mother. We were not very close. And I always said it had to be stage 3. If it had been stage 2, she wouldn't have been as open to helping me as much as she did. But it really improved our relationship. You may decide to purge toxic relationships. That's probably a good idea. And there can be new closeness, tension, or distance in relationships with those who are experiencing the trauma along with you, like a partner. In work, you often don't have the energy to perform at the same level. You also may feel more urgently called to complete a goal, like my client. She really wants to write. And now it's several years later. She's moved. She got a divorce. She's feeling happy and free. And she contacted me recently to say she's working on that book with a lot of great energy. And then also, work you used to enjoy may feel meaningless. You may feel like, I'm not sure why I'm doing this. I need to find something that's more soul-fulfilling. In terms of your own identity, you may be questioning, who am I now? As your roles shift in parenting, work, and family responsibilities. You also face your own mortality. And as a young person, we would have liked to have waited another 30 years to face your own mortality. And yet here it is. You have to deal with it. And then your long-term goals are questioned, strengthened, or sometimes set aside in favor of other ideas. And when you're diagnosed with cancer, everybody inevitably goes through a response in the face of this potential danger that usually is around fight, flight, or freeze. So, and that's a normal response. And let me just poll the group. Does anybody know that when you were diagnosed, you really got into fight? Like you were angry, you were maybe looking everything up, researching, you were, in there talking to the doctor, questioning what she was saying. Anybody fall into that category? Yeah, all right. There's also flight. I've heard about people sometimes who are diagnosed and then they let time go by. They don't show up for their appointment. Or they engage in behaviors that are more kind of escaping. Anybody want to talk to that? And, we can all have all types of reactions. It doesn't have to just be one. Some people have a freeze response where they literally feel like they can't understand anything, and they really feel shut down. Anybody want to? Okay, yeah. It's a very normal response as well. So all of these are normal responses to life and death situations. And so in terms of other physical effects, there can also be, the serious changes to your body from surgery, chemo, radiation, and other types of treatment, dramatic drop in energy, and then a lot of people have issues with sleep. And in one study, or many studies, they're finding that a full 50% of cancer survivors have some features related to post-traumatic stress. And I would say it's probably like 80 or 90, where you have some symptom or another. But the way that you know that you're having a trauma response is that you're either having a lot of intrusive thoughts or feelings about cancer. So it's like on your mind every waking moment, everything reminds you of it, and you're doing some circular thinking around your own mortality, and it's like rumination. You just can't get over it. Maybe you're having dreams about it. Or on the other hand, you may be trying as hard as you can to avoid anything that reminds you of the cancer. And so in this category, and again, nobody is exactly in one or the other. You can have moments of both, but often I'll find people who just would stay away from a support group. They would never go. They may not even come to a conference like this because it's just too triggering, because they are trying as hard as they can to stay away from the feelings. That's not an unusual response. These are trauma responses. They're normal human responses. And from both a psychological perspective and a yogic perspective, we all go through difficult things in life that make us feel fragmented emotionally, and that's to be expected in life, and it certainly is to be expected in the cancer experience. But what's most important is that we find places where you can feel reintegrated, where you're able to integrate your experience so that you can move forward, where you get the support that you need and you can move forward in life. So just because you have any of these symptoms doesn't mean that you're a lost cause. It just means that you're a normal human being. You might not be talking about it, but you're still feeling unexpressed emotions in the mind or in the body. So sometimes people feel like, oh, if you don't talk about it, then it doesn't exist. And I think my husband's family, his sister had given him advice, never bring it up, never let her know you're sad, definitely never cry in front of her, because the idea was that that was going to make it worse for me somehow. And yet, when he told me that, I was like, oh my God, no, I need to know that you're impacted, so that I know that you care. Otherwise, I feel like, oh, he's just jolly while I'm here suffering. That's not good for our marriage. So this is just a little graphic that illustrates what happens quite a bit. You are visiting with a friend, how you doing? And you say, I'm good. And then in your head, you're thinking, how am I doing? How much time do you have? My stress level's through the roof. My spouse thinks I'll never want sex again. My kids are worried about me dying. I don't have the energy to work. I lose my train of thought mid-sentence from chemo brain. People keep emailing me about juicing. And I am effing sick of it all. Hooray. Yes, I wrote that. Yes. I don't want to hear about juicing. Not that I'm against juicing, just it's not going to be the cure-all. So this leads us to principle number 2, which is that you have to feel to heal. And so what is it that you need to feel? You need to be able to feel your core feelings. These are our human feelings that everybody all over the world, all different cultures experience. Anger, sadness, joy, fear, shame, excitement, surprise, disgust. And so there's a couple of these that are really welcomed, especially if you're a cancer survivor. And they are, well, let me just choose one. Joy. Joy is one that is really acceptable. That goes along with gratitude and cheerfulness, right? The rest of it can make people feel uncomfortable because they're not sure what to do or say. And yet you need to find safe places where you can feel your feelings, have them acknowledged, and express them. And so here's just a graphic about some of the different ways where you could feel and express your feelings. You can write about them. You could do a meditation practice where I don't know if you noticed at the beginning, but when we got quiet, then different thoughts and feelings started to come up. Now, not all probably were pleasant. It was probably a mixed bag of different thoughts and feelings. But you weren't pushing them away. You were getting some practice at allowing them to be present. You might need to cry. Crying is really important. It's an integrating thing to do. All of these are ways to integrate your experience. Writing, meditating, crying, walking in nature, talking with a close friend, and exercising. And so then I'm going to move on to principle number 3, which is, yes, it's all well and good to have your feelings and to express yourself, but not everything can be quickly fixed. And sometimes you are in a lot of discomfort emotionally or physically, particularly if you have lingering side effects. And I would say for many people emotionally, it does linger and your healing process takes some time. And in our culture, we are so prone to not want to feel discomfort, right? I mean, everything, we're sold, all day long on ways to avoid discomfort. And I certainly was in that. I wanted to find the meditation that was going to get me out of this depression and, what is it that I need to do to not feel like everything felt meaningless all of a sudden when I should be feeling all joyful and cheerful. And finally, I had a friend who suggested, and this is a deep spiritual lesson, I think, throughout many different religions and spiritual practices, is that there is some medicine in the discomfort if you can allow yourself to sit with it and not try to escape it all the time. It's part of the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey is not an easy one. It's a challenge. And so you have to go through discomfort. That's part of the journey. And some people might even say that treatment is, it's kind of the first part of the journey, and then how you end up dealing with it afterwards and how you move forward in your life, that is going to be, depends on you and what you're going to make of your life's path. There's the idea also that that what you resist persists. Have y'all heard that? So if you're feeling some discomfort, and let's say it's a physical discomfort, like I have mild lymphedema, and I often am trying to ignore it. And then sometimes it will pop up and I'll feel it more sharply. And then what do? I carve out a little more time in my week to address it. I go swimming, I do some exercises for it, I go for a walk and get it moving. I find where my sleeve is. I can never find my sleeves. And then I wear my sleeve, and then that helps it. But just ignoring that problem is not going to make the lymphedema go away. In fact, it can, make it worse. And oftentimes, trying not to feel can cause more discomfort in the long run. And that's true with all of the kind of substances that we use, with drugs and alcohol, with food, with other ways that we escape. Not to say that it's not a good thing to enjoy food and to have a drink, but if that's the main thing you're doing in order to escape your feelings, then you're not sitting with the discomfort long enough to find out that probably the discomfort's not going to kill you. And so you have to make room for it. But how do you do it? Because it's really uncomfortable. Nobody wants to. That's why I call it the beast. And then the question is, how do you befriend the beast? And from a yogic perspective, I came up with 3 ideas, which are that you want to soften your attitude towards yourself. We did that a little bit at the beginning with that grounding meditation. And you want to use any tools that you have for self-soothing that are healthy. And then the third part is that you're going to have to surrender and not imagine, and this is my own personal process, not imagine that I'm in control of everything. I'm not going to be able to control each part of my discomfort. Discomfort is going to exist. I'm going to experience it. And there needs to be a certain amount of surrendering to the fact of that, to the reality of that. But you can have compassion for yourself no matter what you may be feeling. And so these are some affirmations you can use. I give myself permission to feel. I'm a human being. I may feel angry. I may feel distressed. And I can have compassion for myself no matter what I may be feeling. Right now, I have an online weekly healing group, and we're working with a self-blessing where we say, I love myself, I bless myself. And really trying to take in that. That's one you can use with children as well. I love my daughter, I bless my daughter. Now we're going to move on to principle number 4, which is that there are some gifts in the limitations. And there are gifts in setting limits with other people as well. So physical limitations are real. After you have gone through the cancer experience, and I'm going to say for 95%, I'm sure there's 5% of people who really jump back and maybe it didn't phase them. Those are the ones who breezed through it. But for the rest of us, there are some physical limitations. Your body is part of the earth element, and when something happens in the earth, then there's something to deal with. For example, if a hole is dug in the earth, then you have a hole to contend with. And so the same is true with your body that's part of the earth. And so what's going to be important is being able to make space for the fact that these limitations exist. So if you have lymphedema, you're going to have to schedule in ways to make sure that you are addressing that. Whatever the other physical limitations may be, that you have to prioritize that. You have to make sure that that's a very important project for you. And then there's also the importance of being able to set limits with others. Thank you. And so this can be very challenging. And I always like to tell people, no one's going to say thank you when you set limits with them. If you say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well, or I need to rest, or, could you please not, talk about that depressing subject around me? Usually people aren't like, oh, thank you so much for setting that limit with me. And so there needs to be a certain amount of tolerance of your own discomfort with their response, right? They may feel a little uncomfortable if you say no. Or, if you have a spouse, if you let them know, I'm not going to be able to do everything that I usually do in the house and have things happen the same way as usual, they may not like that. But still, it's incumbent on you to really listen to what your body and heart need in order to recover. And so I always like to make an announcement, which is that you do not have to be perfect. Your diet doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to meditate perfectly every day. You don't have to have 100% positive thinking every second. I do not subscribe to that. In fact, I think that's a bypass against really being authentic. You do not have to be perfect in order to recover or to have a good life moving forward. Here's what you should focus on instead, I think, which is building your life force energy. So at the beginning, we were inhaling prana, which is the life force energy, and exhaling tension. And so what I try to do with myself is to be gentle around diet and exercise, and I can always be better with my diet. But it is looking at what are the foods that give me good energy? What are who are the people that give me energy in life? How do I want to be spending my time? And if something is going to build my prana, my life force energy, then I say yes to that. If it's not, then I really try hard to say no. And again, that goes back to setting the limits, right? Nobody's going to thank you for saying, they ask you to volunteer for the school or whatever, and you say, oh, no, I can't. Nobody's going to be like, oh, thank you for taking care of yourself. No, they don't care. And so I have this kind of shorthand that I use for myself, in order to make choices about how I'm going to live my life and what I'm going to do and not do. When I was about 2 years out from active treatment, I was in a group where we were doing some movement meditation, and I had the memory of being 10 years old, no, not 10, of being about 5 years old in Houston, Texas, where I grew up, wearing these patent leather white go-go boots that my parents had given me for Christmas or something. And we belonged to a church, and in church I learned the song, I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Anybody know that song? And so I was so delighted with these go-go boots, and I would dance around in the backyard singing that song at the top of my lungs, really feeling joy and really feeling grounded too, and just it was like a happy period in my life. And I had this flash of that experience, and so I ended up thinking of that experience and calling it my joy boots. And so now what I do is I ask myself, can I do it with my joy boots on? Somebody suggests something or invites me to something, or I have a work opportunity, come speak here to y'all, and I ask, can I do it with my joy boots on? And if I can't do it with my joy boots on, I kind of filter it through my body. I can't do it, I say no, because what's the point? And it's a really kind of a ruthless, determining question, but one that I have found to be very effective in making my choices moving forward. So I would invite you to think about that. It doesn't have to be when you were young. It could be when you were a teenager. When was a time when you felt really good in your body, really happy, and then put a name to it. You can call it something boots. I think somebody was talking about some beautiful necklace she had gotten one time and how sexy she felt. And you're going to ask a question?
If there's any fans with Marie Kondo in the room, that is not just for belongings. People with activities and invitations can find joy or not as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. 100%. Yeah, so think about what that would be for yourself and add boots to it if you want. So I put this elephant here because in my work with survivors, there's always this elephant in the room. And the elephant is, from my perspective and from hearing from many people, it's fear of recurrence that people are contending with. And I did for many years. These days, I do not think about it, even though I know it's possible. And but it's not something I'm thinking about all day long and worrying about. And so that can soften with time. But it's always present for cancer survivors. And it's an important thing to be able to talk to somebody about when it comes up for you. You don't have to squelch that. That's a normal thought and feeling. Even when you get to a point when you're starting to really feel good and feeling kind of like you've gotten your life back, there's going to be some roadblocks that come up. That could be an anniversary date. It could be getting the flu and being reminded of having chemo. It could be a friend being diagnosed. There's all kinds of things that can trigger you to feel back in some of the feelings that you've already moved through. And it's important to know that that's okay. That's a normal part of life. And you go back to your soften, soothe, surrender, being in touch with your own discomfort and allowing that, not judging yourself. And basically my message is that we need to all be finding places where all the feelings are welcome, where you're able to talk about the joy and the gratitude, because that's certainly an important part of the experience, but also the anger and the fear and the grief that you have moved through. You want to seek out places where you feel alive and free and where you can have more joy boots experiences. I had somebody mention in my online group this week that for her, and she's going through treatment, she's pretty ill right now, she gets up very early in the morning and walks outside before daylight. And she says she just feels so alive, looking up at the sky, feeling the air. It just, every single molecule of her body feels alive. And so we all need to be looking for those spaces and cultivating the time to be in the present moment that way. Here I am with my baby, who's 11 years old now and in the 5th grade, getting ready to go to middle school. I thought that kind of my full circle. And that's it. Those are the 6 principles. So the last ones, the 5th and the 6th, number 5 was increasing your life force energy, and number 6 was living with your joy boots on. So finding the places, finding the space within yourself where you are making choices according to what is giving you life.
So thank you. That was great. You can chat her briefly, and I know there's a lot of other